Well, it's that time. Time to officially conclude the top 10 albums that changed my life. This is album number 10. There's a quick recap over something or a couple things. One being that these are not going in order of importance. They're going in chronological order of when the album was introduced to me or when I heard the album. So it's not like this is the most important one. Like they're all somewhat equally important or whatever. These are the top 10 that I chose. And again, the order is not in like, man, this one is the most important and this one is the least. This is just the latest one that I can think of that really changed things for me to a degree to make it on this list of top 10. So, without further ado, Fall City Fall is the band, 1629 is the album. So, this album is super important to me. Obviously, I'm going to tell you why, but it's not just the album. It's really like, again, when the album entered my life, and thus when the band entered my life, because they entered my life through this album. And, well, let's just get into it. So, I believe it was released in 2010, and I heard it very shortly after it was released. I had someone in my life, an acquaintance friend who's in my life, who really turned me on to a lot of music at that time. He was like showing me music constantly. He was a coworker for a bit. We attempted to start a musical project for a bit, and that didn't really turn out. But he introduced me to a lot of stuff that I'm super grateful for because it's stuff that I still enjoy to this day, stuff that I might not have heard of without him. Just like even certain genres of music as a whole, it seemed. I was like, man, I didn't really know that this was a thing. Like, I mean, he turned me on to Amir, he turned me on to, obviously, Fall City Fall, which we're talking about. Just a whole bunch of things. A bunch of things that I still enjoy to this day. So, this album, 1629, again, 2010, and I came to it shortly after then because he was really on top of that scene. They are from Calgary. Calgary, Alberta, 2 hours away from where I live right now. At the time, I was living in Saskatoon, so a little, just, one province over, not very far away, really close to home. That does play a role in why I have this album on the list. But we'll get into that for a second, because I do really want to focus on the album in and of itself, but I mean, like I said, the band, where they're from, and the timing and stuff really plays a role into why I made this list as well, which, I mean, you could argue it shouldn't be on the list then because it's not solely about the album, but the album is such a strong freaking album that it's just, I know this isn't like top 10 albums, like the best albums. It's like, no, why these albums are important to me, why is it on the list of albums that changed my life, and it doesn't have to be about these are the top 10 best albums ever. This is one of the strongest albums on this list of top 10 though. If I was doing like an album review of like the best albums ever, like this is one of those ones that start to finish, all killer, no filler, and it does that within this time period of like, it's less than a half hour. It's 8 tracks, it's like kind of fitting in between an EP and a full length. And that's the thing, it's like, it's just like this just straight punch, and not like this is, one of those quick like grindcore, like boop, like in and out, like smash you in the face like a bag of hammers, punch to the gut and it's out, or like whatever, you know what I mean? It's not one of those where it's like just like bam, like it's a hard album, but we'll get into the particulars in a minute. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. I'm excited, but yeah, it is a strong album in and of itself, but there's all these other factors that play into it. I feel like there's more nuance to why this album is on the list more than almost any other one. So it entered my life at this time where I was just getting into my first bands. That's one reason it's super important. I don't really remember the year that I first got into my first band and started playing shows live, but I do know that it was around this time. It might have been like, yeah, it was around this time of 2010, 2011. If I could still fit that shirt, I'd be wearing it because I have like a Fall City Fall shirt from this album cycle. This is a haunting in text, is what it just says on the front, in hot pink text, and the shirt is like, I don't know how to explain the green it is. It's like a neon-y forest green. I don't know. It's a sick shirt. I still have it. I love it. And of course, I got to show off the posters in the back, because for the Victus album cycle, there's the Fall City Fall poster there. Not a fanboy or anything. It really is just about this album. It's a super important album. I love, Fall City Fall as a whole, but this album is really just like the masterpiece, which is a shame it's not on Bandcamp. I mean, that's like label related, I think. I don't know how. I'm pretty sure this album is on Spotify. I do own the physical copy of this album, the CD that I bought. It's just like a super crazy strong album. So again, in 8 tracks, and of those 8 tracks, I mean, like it totals up to less than a half hour of runtime, but it is solid. It is one of those albums that needs to fully be appreciated in its entirety from start to finish, track 1 to track 8 in chronological order. Don't put it on shuffle. It is a concept album, and it is one of the best concept albums just that I've listened to, in the fact that there's nothing that you could take out where it would still be as strong, and I don't think it needs to add anything. Again, it's in this weird limbo of like EP to full length, and obviously if you have a full length concept album that's 12 tracks or 10 tracks or whatever, the more tracks you add, the more you can miss. But again, this just does such an amazing job. So, The Gate is the first, the title track, and it just starts off just with this, like, I don't know how to, this galloping pace that's just, it's so hard to describe this musically, and I wish I listened to that album. I'm an idiot, because I should have just listened to the album in its entirety before doing this, and I haven't done my reviews in quick succession, so I keep forgetting all the things that I learned before. Regardless, I'm very familiar with the album, and so it just comes in at, like I said, this kind of galloping pace. There's this certain, I don't know how to explain it. There's a certain like slam beat that they just utilize so well that it's part of their signature style that is Fall City Fall. You've got these like punk and hardcore elements into a modern like metalcore thing, but you've got just this, there's just a style that's very unique to them as a band, I feel, and it is completely exemplified on this album, is where it just like peaked for me, and just the use of the 2 vocalists and their different styles, the way that they support each other at times and also have a contrast and bring unique abilities and flavor, I guess, to the tracks. But anyway, they come in swinging with The Gate. If you know this album or whatever, it's usually followed up directly, even in the live set, by Dead Eyes. They're just really strong songs that pack a huge punch. But on almost every track here, we have some relief. These songs are so strong and so heavy lyrically, instrumentally, that we need some relief. And it balances out things so well that it has these melodic moments, these instrumental interludes that play a role, these stoppages and starts that play a role that are so important in each track, but especially The Gate into Dead Eyes. You could play these songs alone and they would still make sense, especially if you just start Dead Eyes. The Gate is a shorter track and just like almost like abruptly ends, and then Dead Eyes would come in and whatever. But I'm not going to talk about every single track. I'm just deciding that now. I'm not going to go and talk about every single track in order, because in its entirety is its strength. We go from, let's think, so we start off with like an intro track basically, but it really leads into Dead Eyes really well. Blackout is next, which is really like a full song in and of itself. And then Trodden Black. I am going to go in chronological order. I guess I am going to somewhat talk about every track, but not in a huge detail. So Trodden Black is almost like an interlude with vocals. It's not just instrumental. We've got like some chanting going on. And again, I'll get into this whole thing thematically and lyrically in a bit as well. But we go back into having these like full songs, I'll say, like 2 more. The Body Discourse and From Dust to the Grave, and then we get in Still Life, Stop Life in Slow Motion, which is another kind of like interlude. So we've kind of got like track 4, and then we've got track 7, and so there's some space in between there, and they are different types of interludes that are definitely shorter than full length, like 3.5 minute or 4 or minutes or whatever longer songs. They're a bit shorter. They provide some room to breathe and some space and some more melody, way less vocals in them, and they just utilize that so friggin' well that it's just amazing. At first, I thought, having 2 of those on just 8 tracks just it almost seemed like filler, but it's not. Like, they are so needed and so well executed. They're just perfect. Like, it just happens to work on this album for them. We've got these like speedier, like I said, punk influences that are on here, but they're done like again with a more robust, full sound that goes much beyond just regular old school grassroots punk or whatever, where I think a lot of this energy is kind of coming from, especially, I mean, if you see them live, and if you've heard live shows or anything like that, that at times they just excelled in that area. But I mean, these songs, again, they're drawing influence from so many places and doing what they should be doing, or what amazing bands do, is drawing influences in where you can even tell there's obvious influences there, yet they are making their own signature style. Again, I think that this album is different than any other album they've made. Their signature style is on it, and it's on other albums like Victus and whatever. However, there is a darkness to this album, deservedly so, especially because of the content, that isn't on the other albums. It's not there. Maybe on the EP that came after this, but I mean, it's only 4 tracks and whatever. It's just, but this really takes it to a dark place. 1629. So, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that 1629 is the name of a daemon, of you could say a demon, of Satan, of an evil spirit, of whatever. Basically, in short form, this is the story of what I'm interpreting of a young man who is possessed by a dark spiritual figure. That's my interpretation. That's always how I've interpreted this album. It is incredibly dark. I wish, you know what? No, I need to use the album cover as the thumbnail. But there is a picture that I could find, and I don't remember the artist, but I know I could find it if I went through all my Juxtapose art magazines, that just exemplifies this album. Just a black and white ink illustration that has like basically a young boy sitting at a desk in school with just like a black ink demon basically entering him and his eyes rolling back. And that's what I think of when I listen to this album or when I talk about this album. It is not, it's just, again, it's got such a unique flavor that it is incredibly hard to categorize, because musically they are doing things that I think makes them a unique band, that sets them apart. And one thing is that the use of 2 vocalists on this album is not a novelty. It is very much utilized in such a great way, in a authentic way. It is part of their signature style that is not a novelty. I don't believe that one person could execute this that well. They support each other at times when needed. I mean, it's like if there were 2 guitarists, and sometimes the guitarist really backs up that, like, you play the riff and you get down heavy, and you both end up doing it and supporting that one riff to make it heavy. So sometimes the layered screaming on this album, with 2 different vocalists, but they're 2 dedicated vocalists that are only vocalists and aren't doing anything else instrumentally at all, live or on the album or whatever, right? So they are also, I guess you could say, like, oh, you can have one person do all these things, but they can't do them simultaneously. So anyway, yeah, I just think that they're using 2 vocalists in a way that is authentic and fantastic, and things that they bring. I mean, we've got Zorno, bringing in like these incredibly deep, dark screams that just allow for the theme and the concept to really come through, and it just utilizes his voice so well. But then we have this other flavor that's like really weird for a dark album like this. If I were to give you all the details of the album and everything first without telling you anything about the musically or the genre or whatever else, we've got Keenan basically, I'm just going to say, rapping on these tracks. His cadence and flow is there. It's very spoken. It doesn't sound like spoken word. It sounds like rapping. It doesn't sound like nu metal, though. It doesn't sound like rap rock. It sounds like this is, for all intents and purposes, if I have to give it a freaking genre, I'll call it no, I can't. Like some weird bastardized metal deathcore thing that has all these other elements, and again, like trying to put it in a category and failing to do so is one of the strengths of this album. It's just because it's rapping doesn't mean that it's nu metal. And it is so authentic. It is so expertly done in this style of music, telling the story and everything else. It's not hokey. It doesn't give it a bad taste. It just flows so perfectly that you don't question it. It didn't sound weird when I heard it. It didn't seem, like I said, hokey or inauthentic or, copying anyone else's style or whatever. And that's the thing. That element, like the rapping element, immediately some people are going to be turned off by just the thought of it, but I assure you, you should still check this out. It doesn't, that's the thing, that element, to me, I don't know where that influence came from. I'm sure that there's a lot of different ways, but I mean, musically, I'm like, this doesn't sound like Linkin Park, this doesn't sound like Limp Bizkit, or anything else where you could be like, oh, it's like heavier music with like these rapping elements. No, it doesn't sound like that to me. Because in and of itself, this style of heavy music, I don't know, I don't see much of this style of rapping, I guess, in it. It's not just like someone, I mean, there's plenty of deathcore albums that have like a rapping cadence, I guess, over like incredibly low screaming. That's not what's happening here. It's just almost like straight up rapping, and it just fits. It just fits incredibly well. But again, I think in this album, it encapsulates basically both these vocalists supporting each other, playing off each other, bringing unique things to the table in telling this story. And again, just through the track listing and the way that it's ordered and everything else, the times that they allow you to breathe, the more melodic, quieter parts that are needed there to give you some relief. In and of itself, this album is just fantastic. The things that came into my life at a time where I was getting into bands, and this band that just had this perfect, amazing album. I never heard a local band, if I want to call them a local band, that was not signed to a label, etc., be this good, be this amazing at songwriting, at live shows that I was lucky to see them at. It was just like, it wasn't something that I had experienced. There's great bands that we even played with in Saskatoon. I knew about other bands, in Alberta or in Saskatchewan or whatever, that were fantastic bands. But this seemed like this is on some next level stuff. And they eventually did end up getting signed to Victory. I believe they're still part of Victory Records. Things have fallen apart all over the place there, with the band in itself almost seeming inactive for huge periods at a time and not keeping up their social media and whatever. And there's some wonky things going on with Victory anyway the past couple of years. And anyway, not going to get into the politics of the label that much. But again, one thing that this album entered my life at a time where I was like, man, this is a band that's a couple hours away. Like, it showed me, I guess, that you can do that. I don't know. It wasn't ever a huge dream of mine or a practical thing for me to say, like, yes, I want the band I'm in to go and play professionally, to make this a career, etc. No, I wanted to record, I wanted to play live, I wanted whatever. But the fact that it could be done at this level locally is just something that I hadn't really seen before, even though I knew it was possible and capable, and you got Nickelback over there. But I mean, in this genre of music, in this style, something unique, something that I can't pigeonhole, coming out with an album like this, the first album I heard from them, because the stuff before it was not great recording, like quality recordings and stuff like that. But I mean, this is the first thing I heard, and then I went back. Like, I was given the demo and whatever else, and there's some cool tracks on there, whatever. But this was just like, if this was a debut album, which it basically was, it was freaking just amazing. It just, again, blew my socks right off. And again, this is just so close to home. That's why it had such a big effect on me. But the other thing is that this just happened to be a time in my life where, again, I was in bands. I needed something to practice to vocally, and like this was one of those things that it helped push my vocals into getting into some lower ranges, and even just like helped me just warm up by even trying to scream these parts that Keenan is rapping and whatever else. Like, I used this as warm-up music. I used it as just like sitting on the bus going to school music. I was walking around. This album makes you feel somewhat evil. But again, not in this hokey, stereotypical, tropey black metal or death metal way, or it's not like a deicide type thing. Like, it's not that. Like, it's not in what I think of as like a scary way. Like, I don't know. This is a story of, again, basic, how I interpret it, a story of a young man possessed. And there's things that one can relate to without that spiritual dark element within here. And things that someone, it could be a metaphor for so many things as well. A dark spiritual element that is, someone is engaging with that. I just think that to me, it's a masterwork. That's just what it is. The contemporary masterwork by a couple of dudes out of, Southern Alberta. That's what it is. And it just, again, the timing of it, the quality of the album, everything else, it doesn't make me feel sick and gross in this evil way that some other music can. And I mean, and sick and gross in a good way, like that's the effect it's supposed to have. That's not what this is. Again, I don't relate to the character in and of itself by, oh, I've had these experiences or whatever else. No, I feel as though that when I am practicing vocals along with it, or I'm listening to it or whatever, I feel like I embody that character. Like I am speaking in a first person point of view sometimes, but there's different voices on this album. There's different voices. There's like different characters that kind of become one character. There's a lot of stuff going on, and there's layers of not only conceptualness, but I mean just the way that the voices and characters are layered. And I'm tripping myself up talking about it. The album is just so good and so strong, and especially if you were a vocalist that does vocals in this style. I remember sitting on the bus and being like, I wish I was walking right now so I could scream along to this, because I couldn't sit still. It makes you want to move. I am not a person who, when I went to live shows, really got involved that much. I mean, the older I got, the less I got involved, I guess, in moshing, in expressing myself physically in the pit or any other place. But there are tracks on here that I need to move to. Even if I was just walking, like I can't stand still. I can't sit still at all. It's just not something that can happen. So again, this is a concept album. It needs to be listened to in that context, from start to finish. In the track listing the way it is, you can pick apart. Like, it's the thing. There's some songs that, yes, I could pick them out and just listen to that song, and it's still a great, amazing song. But it's just so powerful as a whole. I want to get into the ending real quick because, again, it's just part of how this thing works so well. And some things that happen musically that, to me, mirror the conceptualness of it. And, like, the last lines being screamed, even, like, I am 1629, that's the last thing you hear, the name of the album. It's been said before in the album, and you have an idea of what 1629 embodies. In the album, like the CD, the physical insert and stuff, it has some notes in there, which I'm not going to get into. But what is happening instrumentally as well towards the end there, it's a rhythmic chaos, and then it abruptly stops. And it's like, wow, it's over. Like, that journey that I was on as the character, as an audience member, as a listener, a voyeur, whatever, it's done. And you're sitting in silence for a second. It just ends so abruptly, and then it comes right back. Like a few seconds of silence, and then it comes right back, and it becomes more rhythmic. You've got some bass drops in there that come, and it's just like it just is a pattern, and it's back. And I that's one of my favorite things conceptually, because it's not over. You feel like, are you going to get relief? Is this character going to get relief? Is whatever? No, you're not. It's not over. It's happening again. And I think that is just something so freaking strong to wrap up this album, that when it finally does end, I don't know, it's like you have this room to breathe, and you just, I don't know, I feel like a heavy weight. Not that it's lifted, I just feel a heavy weight. It is just there. So again, this is 1629. Part of why it's on this list, why it is so important to me, again, is the time it came into my life, what I was doing at the time in my life, which was just getting into bands as a vocalist. This really helped push me and to be better, because I had a model for what I could be like that was close to home, that seemed within reach, and whatever else, like hometown heroes. But I didn't really feel like I had that in Saskatoon. I had other bands that were around, but I didn't really know much of that scene either at the time, like beforehand. Like, I knew, not in that genre of music, put it that way. Not in something that we were pursuing in the bands I was in. But this influenced me in so many different ways, and inspired me in so many different ways, But without that element, the album is just so freaking strong. Like I said, it was really hard to sit still while listening to it, and it was really hard not to scream along to. Like, it is just such a masterwork of an album. And that's why, it's on this list of top 10 albums that changed my life, because it opened doors, again, for me, not just about things like, it opened doors, like, musically, like, there's so many different genres now, or whatever that I'm into because of this, and, like, no. I mean, it just opened doors for me as an artist to believe that those barriers weren't there, that these are things that are capable of happening. I don't know, it was just a really inspiring album. Yeah. I don't know how well I'm explaining things. I'm all worked up, and this is also the end of this series, and it's weird. But it's a freaking fantastic album. Again, like most of my favorite artists, I feel like the work defies definitive genre specifically. I really feel like it exemplifies this crazy unique style. The energy on it cannot be, denied, and it's not. It is so authentic. That is the other thing. Despite the fact that being a different style of music that I was in with the bands I was in, or that we were trying to create, because there's not a lot of these. It's still heavy. It's still metal to me. That's what we were doing. But I mean, it just had its own authenticity to it. There was an art to it. This album, to me, again, was art, but in a very different way than the other ones. It's a concept album that I've never heard one like before or since. Where, again, the genre of music, I don't believe there's a lot of concept albums in that range, and especially not ones that are done well. Concept albums in general are such a huge undertaking, and for a band this young at that time, inexperienced. I mean, they had been creating music for years before this and whatever, but their dedication and hard work and just, again, I can't stop saying the word authenticness seemed to, there was no denying it. It just came through, and the music was so visceral, and the concept, again, it makes one feel things that even when it's such an extreme topic that you may not relate to it in a very literal way, I don't think it can be not felt. If you sit down and listen to this album, less than a half an hour, from point A to B, start to finish, in chronological order, I would really be curious as to how you feel and what you think and what is going through your mind and heart and soul and whatever else. It's just a freaking fantastic album that entered my life at the perfect time, and it's still a joy to listen to now. And that's it. That is it. So we will see you on another time.